Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. FICCI Heal 2018 is a really wonderful endeavor. To see all of you here from healthcare as well as allied industries from across under one roof is really reassuring. It's really heartening to see that all of you are here to deliberate on the challenges and opportunities so as to increase the quality healthcare services in India. I think if we all commit ourselves to this collaboration, it will really make a big difference. Thank you so much, FICCI, for inviting me to be here. I really feel very happy to be part of this conclave. Today I wish to talk about bridging the gap between the mentally ill and the mentally strong. So according to the WHO, mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So deriving from mental health, what then is mental illness? Mental illness is any of a broad range of medical conditions that are marked primarily by sufficient disorganization of personality, mind or emotions to impair normal psychological functioning and cause marked distress or disability while functioning during work, social or family activities. So this was quite a complicated and quite a complicated definition. So to put it more simply, a mental illness is a disease of the brain that causes mild to severe disturbances in thought and or behavior, resulting in an inability to cope with life's ordinary demands and routines. What are the types of mental illnesses or disorders that afflict people? So there are more than 200 classified forms of mental illness. Clinical depression, anxiety, substance abuse, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia are just some of the more common ones. Probably you have heard of some or all of them. Let me assure you that it can affect any people, any persons of any age, race, religion, income, without any biases whatsoever. It could affect you, it can affect me. And it is shocking that so many people in India are not even aware that they may be suffering from a mental illness. I think that's because there is a grey area that exists between normal anxiety and an anxiety as a mental disorder. Similarly, there is a grey area between having a low mood or whether it is a depressive disorder. So what are the causes of these mental illnesses and disorders? Think of the brain as a complicated data center with racks of servers and miles of wires connecting them. An integrated and interconnected highway of millions of nerves which can be compared to the complex data wiring that exists in the brain, the body's CPU, and can process responses and coordinate communication in a matter of nanoseconds. But what happens if there is a fault in the wiring or a single server or neuron of the human brain begins to malfunction in the smallest of ways? This results in a neurochemical imbalance. These neurochemicals, which are called neurotransmitters, are responsible for different emotions like the feel happy ones, the feel good ones, or even the low moods. And when these neurotransmitters get imbalanced, it results in a mental illness. Coming to the next question, why do these mental imbalances occur? So primarily again, there are three main causes. One, genetic. So just like diabetes is a genetic disorder, mental illnesses can often and typically run in families as well. People inherit genes that make them susceptible to mental disorders. Not always, but the probabilities remain high. 2. Psychological causes. Emotional, physical, sexual abuse, childhood trauma, victimization of any kind may all lead to mental issues as an aftermath. One may develop an intense phobia, which can then come in the way of one's daily functioning. 3. Environmental or lifestyle causes. Prenatal damage, stress, substance abuse, financial hardships, social struggles, family issues all these can lead to mental concerns. So this is a bit about the basics of mental illness. That raises the query, how do mental illnesses affect people's lives? Simply put, they have a massive negative impact in more ways than one. First of all, they affect a person's physical health in a direct manner. Mental illnesses are known to increase the risk of cardiovascular diseases, and stress-related disorders can even cause cancers. There's a connection between diabetes and depression. These mental illnesses can affect a person's feel-good neurotransmitters and strip him of the joy of living, the happiness in life. They also affect every aspect of person's work life. When a person isn't mentally happy or healthy, functional limitations come into play. The capacity to focus, multitask, handle pressure, to interact with others, to respond to change, all gets affected negatively. Functionally, even getting out of bed, a simple routine like having a bath, even those become a struggle. To make things worse, people hide their issues at work, lest it affects their reputations or gets in the way of their promotions. And then there is a social impact. Mental concerns affect a person's ability to interact with one's family members. In fact, a mental concern doesn't only affect the person, but it has a domino effect on the entire family. Individuals and their families go through immense struggle and agony, and sometimes for years on end. Self-harm on the extreme end, even suicide, is one of the worst case scenarios. In contrast to a mentally ill person, a person with mental illness, who do you consider as a mentally strong person? So we all undergo stress and trauma, failure, and all those things which can lead to mental concerns if not dealt with in the right manner. A mentally healthy person is someone who is able to deal with and fight these causes and effects of mental concerns. They are people who show resilience or have a deep, effective coping mechanisms and do not disregard the fact that their mental well-being contributes equally, if not more, to their overall wellness. Coming now to the larger landscape of India's mental health status. So let's look at some hard revelations. Mental illnesses constitute 1/6 of all health-related disorders, and a study by WHO shows us that 7.5% of the Indian population suffers from some form of mental disorder with no discernible rural-urban differences. The WHO also predicts that by 2020, roughly 20% of India will suffer from mental illnesses. Up to 50% of mental, behavioral and psychological problems have their onset during adolescence. And according to 3 papers published in The Lancet, India accounted for nearly 15% of the global mental, neurological and substance abuse disorder burden, and that is really huge. But what is most shocking is that most people in India are not even aware that they may be suffering from a mental health concern. A 2012 WHO report also recorded that India has the highest number of suicides in the world, a shocking 32% of the global total. The rate is even higher among the youth aged 15 to 29, where there are 35.5 suicides per 100,000. In fact, every 3 seconds, someone attempts a suicide in India. Now let's take a look at the prevalent data as far as the availability of mental health care in the Indian subcontext. So sadly, this picture is really bleak. At least 10 crore people need mental health care in India, a number that is 1.5 times the entire population of the UK. And to cater to them, there are only 3,800 psychiatrists, 898 clinical psychologists, 850 psychiatric social workers, and 1,500 psychiatric nurses. Our country has only 43 mental care hospitals with a combined capacity of 20,000 beds. Further, India only spends a minuscule of 0.04% of its health budget on research, infrastructure, and talent pool for mental health, compared to developed countries that spend 4 to 5%. A Human Rights Watch report also exposed the horrific conditions in Indian institutions where so many women with mental disabilities are confined, often against their will. So many of them are frequently subjected to physical and sexual abuse and the inhuman use of electric shocks, called electroconvulsive therapy. Add to that, facilities that are requisite for women at mental health institutions are almost non-existent. Even the so-called well-known hospitals do not have a psychiatric ward. Very recently, one of our own clients at Empower attempted suicide. The Empower personnel rushed her to the closest hospital, one of the best known in Mumbai, but the OPD was hesitant to even administer treatment since it was a psychiatric case. They didn't know which doctor to register the case under. Eventually, the client had to be registered under the name of a doctor practicing in another medical field altogether, but obviously under our care. Such is the appalling situation. So the treatment gap, as measured by the absolute difference between the prevalence of mental illness and the proportion of patients that get treatment, is 76% to 85% in less developed countries. It oscillates between 82% and 96% in different parts of India, an extremely high difference. This inadequacy exists because of lack of infrastructure and trained human resources. And despite recent improvements, unfortunately, India's mental health indicators compare unfavorably with other middle-income countries. But all of it needs to change now, and I strongly believe that everyone has the right to lead a full life with respect and dignity in every respect, social, familial, and professional, despite having a mental illness. So how do we go about bridging the gap between the mentally ill and the mentally strong in India? Sadly, mental illness, as we all know and we are all aware, is a deeply ingrained taboo subject. People are able to discuss their physical health concerns very openly, but even acknowledging to oneself about a mental illness is even a thought, let alone a conversation, that is brushed under the carpet. In the absence of scientific explanations and lack of awareness, mental illnesses have been greatly feared in the past and blindly interpreted as a sign of weakness, karmic punishments, some form of black magic, and all arising purely out of superstitious beliefs and bad upbringing. And therefore people have been just conditioned into thinking of them as some monstrosities, which has led to two kinds of stigmas: a social stigma, where whose suffering from mental concern is just shunned by society and discriminated against and even called mad; and B, perceived as self-stigma, where an individual considers his or her illness as a personal failing and even a character flaw. The disease comes with a package of shame. Mental illnesses tend to isolate people and make them feel very lonely and very helpless. The discovery of a mental illness is often followed by denial and hesitation to even seek help. What will people say? There's an interesting case that we had actually at Empower again, and again very recently. Well, we are only 2.5 years old. So of two women, both married, there were two women, both married into the same affluent joint family, living under one roof. One of them, both had a mental disorder. One of them came to the clinic, went to see the psychologist. Upon exiting the psychologist's office, to her surprise, she found her sister-in-law at the same place, in our clinic, entering. Neither of them knew that both of them were suffering from a mental disorder. They both hadn't discussed it and were both trying to hide it from the other person. And they both got to meet each other at Empower. So that is stigma for you, where people living in the same house don't even want to even discuss it with each other. In rural areas, mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar are considered to be cases of possession by evil spirits. Sadly, people don't even realize that these mental illnesses are not insurmountable. There are treatments available to cure them, and even when it comes to illnesses with no cure, especially the genetic ones, it is possible to control them, just like we do with asthma, hypertension, diabetes. One learns to live with them and live fully productive lives. So what should our call to action be? First and foremost, we need to foster awareness and education regarding mental health. We have to aggressively fight the rampant stigma and misconceptions attached to mental illnesses and have to have a more sensitive approach towards them. We must encourage dialogue around this topic. We must dispel the myths. For this, we as individuals must get involved and engage with the private sector and the media as well. The social media can be a powerful tool for changing mindsets. Mental health awareness needs to be advocated in our educational institutions too, so that children understand the concept of mental well-being right from a young age. We also need to ensure that there is a political will to allocate greater infrastructure and resources to quality mental health care. There is also an immediate need for capacity building in terms of more mental health institutions, beds, and other facilities. Also, we need a large number of trained psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, and nurses to emerge from the coming generation to fill the dearth of personnel that afflicts us today. And importantly, we must ensure that mental health care is made available to everyone equally across the length and breadth of the country, irrespective of the economic strata that they come from. One positive is that the Mental Health Act 2017 has come into effect. Thankfully, the MHA has now made it mandatory for all insurance companies to make provisions for medical insurance for the treatment of mental illnesses on par with that of physical illnesses. This will definitely prove to be a blessing for those who have suffered due to lack of finances in the past. The MHA aims to humanize the treatment given out to individuals requiring mental care. It will endeavor to set up the much needed infrastructure and at the same time regulate and monitor mental health care services and advance directives. Importantly, under the MHA, suicide has finally been decriminalized. Use of chains to restrict the mentally unwell has been barred. The use of the electric shocks, electroconvulsive therapy, has been banned on children and will need to follow strict guidelines for adults. As individuals and as a society, we need to do our bit as well. It needs to be a collaborative effort by both the government and individuals. A little bit about Empower now. Empower is something which is very, very close to me. It started as an ambitious dream and now has become a solemn vow. It's a passionately ongoing endeavor to be the movement to affect change. We are proactively creating awareness. Our cyclothon Ride to Empower, running in its 4th year, the Empower Marathon having seen 3 editions, our music concert Empower Fest is now in its 2nd. All these activities actively promote mental health awareness and bring people advocating it together. We're also looking to use regional languages and the social media very, very extensively as tools to create pan-India awareness. We're hoping to channelize the youth, our change makers, to give further impetus to this movement. We've run several radio campaigns, social media campaigns to get our message to the public. The second wing, at Empower, we also offer psychological, psychiatric and neurodevelopment assessments and evaluations and counseling and psychotherapy for all disorders like substance abuse, depression, psychosis, etc. We have in our organization trained personnel who specialize in dealing with patients of all ages and from all walks of life. We currently have 2 centers in Mumbai and a cell in Goa with expansion plans for all cities and towns across India. We genuinely want to make a meaningful difference, even with people from economically challenged backgrounds. It is of vital importance to us that we provide the exact same level of mental health care and service to all, which is why we have the foundation where any individual, regardless of socio-economic status, can benefit from our services at a subsidized rate. One Empower is not enough. We have to create a ripple effect. We have outreach initiatives like workshops in schools, NGOs, hospitals and communities, particularly amongst parents and the youth. Empower is the first institution to receive a youth mental health first aid accreditation from Australia, a 14-hour certified course which trains lay people to understand first aid and the basic hygiene of mental health concerns. It trains people to become the first point of contact. We at Empower strongly believe and advocate it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be mentally ill, but it is not okay not to seek help. I strongly believe that by way of resolute actions, together we can transform into a stigma-free society where mental health care and well-being is a priority for everyone. It is possible to bridge this gap between the mentally ill and the mentally strong, but we need to start now. I applaud FICCI Heal 2018 once again for this initiative. Their annual healthcare conferences bring together all stakeholders, the government, the private sector, the pharmaceutical industry, and healthcare professionals from all parts to promote this collaboration and networking. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening. Have a good evening.